Hey, what's up, guys? Hope you're doing well today. It's getting cold now, so yeah, gotta have my blanket with me. But as we get into the passage, I want you to just open your mind, open your heart, and hopefully this will speak into your life, so that you know which way to go, which steps to follow, and which example to follow as well. So the title of my message is called "Following Footprints." Following footprints. And the passage we're going to be reading from is First Peter chapter 2, verses 21 to 25. So it reads, "For even hereunto were ye called, because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example that ye should follow his steps, who did no sin, neither was gall found in his mouth, who when he was reviled not again. When he suffered, he threatened not, but committed himself to him that judgeth righteously, who his own self bears our sins in his own body on the tree, that we, being dead to sins, should live unto righteousness, by whose stripes were ye healed. For ye were as sheep going astray, but are now returned unto the shepherd and bishop of your souls." And so the title of my message is Following Footprints, and you're going to see why. So as I try to do with all my messages, try to break it up into 3 points. And so point number one is found in verses 21 and 22, which is called Following the Right Steps. So Christ suffered for us. As Christians, we are partakers of not only his blessings, but his sufferings. And I mentioned this on one of the other devotions I did. So we're going to see that suffering is part of a Christian part of life in general, actually. So if you go to Luke 9:23, it says, "If any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me." Part of taking up your cross and part of following Jesus is that we're following what he did. And he didn't just go through a life that was full of blessings. In fact, there was more trials, more tribulations, more sufferings. And that's the life we need to follow. Like, I know it's kind of crazy to think about the sufferings that Jesus went through, and the fact that we had to follow that as well. But the next part it says Christ left us an example to follow. So if we go to First John chapter 2 verse 6, which is just the next book over, First John chapter 2 verse 6, it says, he that saith he abideth in him ought himself also to walk even as he walked. So you see, this is the example we need to follow. So Jesus, if we say that Jesus is in our life and that we believe in him, then we need to follow what he did. And then the next part is, Christ was sinless and innocent, who did no sin, neither was gall found in his mouth. Going to Isaiah chapter 53, verse 9, it says, "And he made his grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death, because he had done no violence, neither was any deceit in his mouth." Now, there's a game that comes to my mind. This one here. This was a game called Metal Gear Solid. There's a part in this mission where you're in a snow setting. There's snow on the ground, and when the guard sees some footprints that you've left behind, he says, "Whose footprints are these?" That probably comes to your mind now. But yeah, if you played that game. And so this guard follows the footprints, not knowing where it goes. He's just like, "Oh yeah, let's follow these footprints." And the question I have for you is, whose footprints are you following? Is it footprints that's going to lead you to the right way, or is it footprints that are going to lead you somewhere else? And then that's something to take in. Make sure you're following the right example. Jesus says that he left the example for us to follow, the right steps here. This is the right steps we need to follow. Point number 2, in verse 23, we find following the right response. So who, when he was reviled not again. When people criticize Jesus, Jesus never responded in an aggressive way or an angry way, even though he was probably, shamed and, just mocked for things he didn't do. He never responded in the flesh like how we would. He responded unto righteousness. When he suffered, he threatened not. Again, when we go through suffering, what do we normally do? We kind of retaliate in the flesh, eh? But Jesus remained in the Spirit. He remained in the Spirit, and he showed that he was of God. But he shows us further down in verse 24, verse 23, but he committed himself to him that judgeth righteously. Jesus didn't go to anyone else. He went straight to God. He considered him first through the sufferings that he was going through. And so the question I want to ask you is, during your suffering, do you confide in God, or do you commit unto other things or other people? God has all the answers. We say that, but do we believe that? Because if we did, we would go to God. And then the last point is following the right way, which is found in verses 24 and 25. Christ had no sins to bear of his own. In fact, he took upon our sins and he took it to the tree, the cross. He got it nailed to the cross. I don't know about you, but when I think about the sins I've committed, not just as a Christian, but before then, there's so many to count. Like, the list goes on. And that's just from me. And then now look at your life. How many sins have you committed as a Christian and even before that? He'd say there's so much to name. Now that's only 2 people, yourself and me, with all those sins. Now imagine the whole world. Now, man, when I thought about that, I was like, this is, amazing. This is what true love is. That Jesus would die in our place. Someone who did nothing wrong, but took on our sins to die for that. That is, humbles me every time. Every time I go through problems, trials, I always think about what Jesus did for me. And that's the perspective we need to have here. Because of that, we have been healed. By his stripes, we have been healed. By his crucifixion, by his death, we can do good. Jesus didn't die for the good we did. He died for the sins we did. Because that sin was blocking us doing good for him. And because he died for that, we can now do good for him because he is good. Lastly, in verse 25, because we have an example to follow, we're not like them wandering sheep. We're not like the sheep that have gone astray. However, we can still live a life like sheep's going astray. And that's only because we're following the wrong footprint. And are we following footprints that lead to the cross? Or are we following footprints that lead away from the cross? That's the comparison I have here. And so with the closing question, are you a sheep going astray, or are you a sheep dwelling with the shepherd of your soul? And so with that said, I just got a few principles and then that's us. So principle number 1 is remember to follow the right steps. The example that Jesus left behind, that's the steps we ought to follow, the footprints we need to follow. And then number 2, follow the right response. Remember when Jesus was facing hardship and suffering, he didn't threaten or he didn't go back in the flesh to respond how we would, but he responded with humbleness, and he was silent during the suffering. Live a life that is dead to sin, but living unto righteousness. Just like Christ, his example, the fact he had no sin, but he died for sin, and he lived unto the righteous judge. That's who we need to